Paul Wardlaw, welcome to the ITA College Tennis Coaches Podcast.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I'm no doubt I will learn a lot throughout this conversation, but more importantly, our coaches will too. But Paul, can we just take you back to how you first got interested, involved in college tennis coaching?
All right. No, it's kind of an interesting story and happened back in the early 80s. Um, had been in grad school for philosophy and had done that. Was also a head pro at a club in Oak Park, Illinois, and took a year off after grad school. Did a little bit of commercial real estate with the owner of the club, and knew that I wanted to get back into education in some form. And saw an ad in the Chicago Tribune. On one column, it was, "We need a tennis coach," and then on the other column, it was, "We need a soccer coach." And this was for Illinois Benedictine College. So I went in there, just stopped in. It was one of those back in the day when HR was a little different. So you walked in, you said, "Hey, can I speak with the athletic director?" And they're like, "Sure." So I go in there and say I'm interested in the job, and gave my background, which was probably heavier in tennis. I played college soccer, so had that. But then it was like, well, I asked him, I said, "Can you make this more of a full-time job?" And he goes, "Well, we need a facilities director." I said, "I can do that." And he said, "We need an intramural director." I said, "Oh, I can do that." And then he said, I said, "Well," he goes, "What else can you do?" And I said, "Well, I can teach philosophy." So he picks up the phone, he calls the chair of the philosophy department while I'm sitting there, and I say, "Hey, do you need an instructor?" And they're like, "Yeah, we need an instructor." And he goes, "Oh, I got one for you." So all of a sudden, I had instant job, 5 pieces. I was definitely a busy boy. It was one of those 8 a.m. to midnight type jobs, but I had a blast. And I think what's cool about starting off, especially in D3, wearing a lot of hats, is you learn a lot.
Hmm.
This was back in the day where I would help stake out the field. Some days I would help line the field for soccer. And we started that program. It was the first year they had soccer. We started with 14 players and had a pretty tough schedule. We were going to play defending national champs Rockford. So we got through the season. We were, I think, 1-13-1. And my God, you talk about a celebration when we tied. And then when we
Yeah.
finally won a game, it was pretty incredible. But so the next year, here's what's pretty cool about the soccer program. I just hit Chicago area. And the next year we won the league. We ended
Wow.
up beating Rockford, who had won the national title 2 years earlier. And but was also the tennis coach and got that going. And first year we were competitive, and then the next 3 years we won the league. And but it was, you talk about trial by fire and having a lot of freedom to try different things, to make mistakes. So it was actually a really great environment to cut your teeth. And then I left there to go to Kenyon College, and I
Wait,
thought
hold,
I died and gone
hold
to
on,
heaven. Yeah.
Paul. So why did you gravitate towards tennis and not soccer coaching?
Well, I went to Kenyon, and
Yeah.
I thought I died and gone to heaven because now I only had 3 jobs instead of
Okay.
5. I was head women's soccer, head men's tennis, head women's tennis. And this was back in the day. What did the men's soccer coach? Men's soccer. So it
Hmm.
was like that they considered that an equitable position. I was head coach of 3 sports, and he had men's soccer. So,
Right.
but
Right.
so I did stay with soccer, and I think to get back to your question, um, we had a lot of success at Kenyon,
Hmm.
and I was being pretty creative, and directionals came out. We were doing some other interesting things. We have a thing called Players Club that we can talk about.
Hmm.
Um, we had because of my duties coaching 3 teams. I had an assistant for tennis, but how do you run 3 programs that are year round and that are all on the national level?
Mm.
And so what I would do is in the fall, I'd go down the hill, coach soccer, come back up the hill, and we charted every drill. And that's kind of where the whole pressure tennis idea started. Um, I had done some of that with soccer at Illinois Benedictine, but how do you run 3 programs when you're only going to be in one place? So that allowed me to come back up the hill, look at the clipboard and say, okay, here's how we're practicing as a group, and here's how individuals are practicing. And so that's kind of how the system was initially created for tennis. So,
Yeah. And then during that time, you continued to, well, you enjoyed a lot of success, obviously, three Division 3 national championships at Kenyon. Based on that success, was your mind made up then that, okay, this is the direction I want to go? I just want to have the ability to focus on one tennis team and put all my energy and attention there. Was that your reasoning for moving on to Iowa?
well, I think it's kind of situational. I really enjoyed the assistant coach I worked with. It's a guy named B. Palmer. B had been the head women's tennis coach at Florida and had been a national player back in the day in terms of his program was a top program. And he happened to be the Episcopal priest at Kenyon College
Hmm.
and a tennis junkie. And we would spend hours talking about tennis. But he was the assistant. So I enjoyed that aspect. And then I think I love the idea of building and creating.
Okay.
And I think so many of my ideas that were new at the time were coming out of tennis. So I think that was enjoyable. And then the success, obviously winning the national titles. And Kenyon was an amazing place at that time. We had Jim Steen, he was the swim coach. Steen won, I think, 51 national titles
Oh my
with the
God.
swimming program,
Yeah.
31 straight with the men, 19 straight with the women, ended up winning like 21, 22. And this guy was amazing. And so here's what's cool about Kenyon. If you didn't win a national championship, you had a bad year
Yeah.
because everybody, the Steiner was going to win his.
Right.
And it was the type of sports, swimming, tennis, soccer. Those are the type of sports that Kenyon can do well at.
Hmm.
And the soccer teams got pretty good. So it was pretty cool working with somebody like that. And I think one of the things I learned from Jim Steen is he reinvented his program almost every year. There were
Wow.
core foundational principles, but he knew that there had to be something new and interesting, and he would try all kinds of different things. So it was more like a swimming laboratory.
Yeah.
And, so it was a cool place. I mean, both our daughters were born there. I'm coaching 3 teams. I actually built our house with a friend of mine at the same time. We would be up on the roof at midnight shingling on a Friday, so with floodlights. I, it was before email, so we could get a lot of things
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. That's funny. And so with the Iowa position, then did they come after you because of the success they'd seen, or it was just something that caught your attention?
I actually interviewed the fall. Let's see, when did I leave? For 1997 in the spring. I got the Iowa job. That fall, I had interviewed at Kansas. Chuck Merzbacher had left to go to Ohio State, and they
Hmm.
brought in 3 candidates: Frank Polito, who was the assistant, and then Roland Thornquist, and then
Yeah.
myself. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of a taste of D1. And what's interesting is I'm a D3 guy. I played at the College of Worcester, played soccer, tennis. I
Hmm.
like the small college environment. Um, but at the same time, it was kind of a Dr. Frankenstein move, which is, can I build the same kind of monster I had at Kenyon at Iowa? And so that was the fun aspect of it, to see what I was doing at Kenyon. Will it relate and will it apply
Hmm.
to Iowa? And
And,
but here's
and
the thing: when I interviewed or when I applied to Iowa, my resume was thrown in the trash.
okay.
And so, and I know I learned later that it was only resurrected when one of the committee members called Jeff Moore at Texas,
Hmm.
and they were talking about the candidates they had. They were all D1 assistants, and they mentioned my name, and Jeff Moore goes, "Well, you got to interview that guy."
Hmm.
And so that's how I got back on the table.
Hmm.
And then I find out later, I think I was like the 4th person they wanted to hire. So the pecking order remained in nice clear order. And I know 2 who turned it down. So maybe I was the 3rd guy. But
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of those you never know, and it's kind of crazy how things work out.
It is. It is. And then at Iowa, pretty quickly, I mean, I think maybe they were 1-10 your first year. Didn't obviously inherit a great situation, but by your second year, brought the team to the round of 16 at the NCAA championships, which is obviously a phenomenal turnaround. So what do you believe you did well early in your tenure there to help create such a great turnaround for the program?
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably a career highlight, getting to the round of 16 and how we did it. And we can talk about that. But um, yeah, it was the first year there, we went from, I think to your point, we were 1-10 or whatever. And then my first year there, we finished seventh in the Big Ten. And I think we were ranked in the 60s. So that was a big celebratory moment because we were at least in the conversation somewhere. And
Hmm.
then the next year we brought in one player, Tony Nakova, who ended up coaching at William and Mary,
Yep.
Tony Bickford. And then um, that team went to the round of 16, and we finished fifth in the Big Ten that year. And
Wow. Okay.
and I remember it was pretty funny. We go to the NCAA tournament and Frank Brennan's there and he goes, "So you guys finished fifth in the Big Ten? That must be a hell of a league. You're in the round of 16, you know." So it's like Stanford's
Yeah.
pretty good. Yeah. But and we lost. We played Duke, who was the second seed. I think we lost in an hour and a half. But it was a great experience to get down there and do
Hmm.
that. So, how did we do it? I think a lot of it was being more disciplined. We tapped into directionals, um, but we do a thing I think is interesting called Players Club, and and I learned this when I was at Kenyon. We won our first national championship in '93, and that summer I crashed and burned. I was depressed. I didn't want anything to do with tennis. I canceled all my camps. And I had a good conversation with BE, the assistant. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this again. It was just, and here's what had happened. We had gone from 10th in the nation my first year there to 8th to 2nd to 1st. So we had climbed the mountain, but it's like anything. You know, if the whole process is about success, it's pretty empty. And if you read a lot of sport biographies, there's so many stories of coaches who have done well, and that first championship is a pretty empty one.
Yeah.
And I think where I've been fortunate is having success early has allowed me to rethink what I'm about and to actually focus more on having a purpose, having a bigger picture that creates a framework which I think is obviously more positive for the players, but also for me. I can give you some of the principles that we use, but
Yeah.
the
We'd
idea
love that.
is the idea is, what are we about as a profession? And and I think right now, especially in the quote unquote modern age, it's, well, how do we be human in the modern age?
Mm.
And and then you go, and I like the human questions. What does it mean to be a human? And I've got four different statements that I like. One is humans are relational, and that's from Martin Buber. Uh, Humans are meaning seekers. Humans are creators, and humans are storytellers. And if we look at those things, that is our framework for what we're about. How do we
Hmm.
be human in the modern age? And what does that mean? What does it mean for humans to be relational? And Buber has a really nice distinction. It's we look at um, our relationship with others, sentient beings. We look at our relationships with nature, and we look at our relationships with the spiritual. And uh, humans are meaning seekers. You think of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He has this whole logotherapy concept, which is really about we're driven as humans to find meaning in our lives.
Hmm.
So, with those four statements, that's what we work on with our team. And at Kenyon, we did a lot of work on humans are relational, and we had 6 different relationships that we focused on. And the goal here is how do you create healthy relationships in 6 different avenues? And the first one is player to self, then it's player to teammate, then player to team, player to coach, player to sport, player to parents. And going to college is kind of I always see it, it's the player's initiation ritual, where they're trying to go from adolescence to adulthood. And so what is their relationship with their parents, which is going to change. But the goal for us is to create healthy relationships in those 6 areas. And so it's kind of a conceptual approach. And then the question is, well, how do you do that? And I remember my first day at Denver, I walked into the classroom and wrote up on the board, humans are relational. What does this mean? And the players were able to come up with relationships with other people, with nature, and the spiritual. I mean, Martin Buber's a genius. How did they
Mhm.
come up with this? No one had ever asked. And when they wrestled with it and thought about it, this is what they came up with. And then the question was, well, hey, we're a tennis team, we're gonna deal with people. What are what are some essential features of a healthy relationship with a teammate? They came up with 52 unique concepts.
Wow.
I mean, I'm good for 12. If you
Yeah.
ask me, I'd struggle to get more than 15. But as a group, and they worked in groups of 3 and came up with their list, 52. And again, it's like, it's amazing what these kids know,
Mm.
but we don't ask. And I think so much of the art of coaching is learning how to ask the question and tapping into the wisdom of the player and the team, but also finding out where they're coming from. And so, I mean, I think part of my background in philosophy is it's more of a Socratic method where you learn that it's really about the question rather than about the statement.
Mm. So Paul, then, so you referenced this as, or you named it the Players Club. So how does that actually look? You have that first initial session with the chalkboard, with the team,
Mhm.
but then over the course of the year, how do you continue to have these conversations, ask these questions? Is this set up in your schedule on a weekly basis? Tell us
Mhm.
how this Players Club actually looks in practice.
Yeah, and it'd actually be a fun thing to do at the ITA convention, just to show people
Yeah.
what you can do. But um, one of the things, what we do is Friday afternoon after practice.
Okay.
The kids aren't having to go to seminar. If we're in town, we'll do it. If we're on the road, we'll do it. And what, and again, the art of the deal is what are the needs of the team? And where are we in the season? Are there issues we need to deal with? And
Hmm.
I look at Players Club, it's preventive medicine because what you're doing is you're creating a framework for you to be able to solve problems. And one of the things, just the 6 relationships that I described, what you'll find is if you have a team issue, it's a breakdown in one of those 6 areas.
Mm.
And so right away, now you have a sense of, well, all right, what type of problem is it? And then it gives you a better context in how to address it. And you've already talked about it. So it's not something new.
Hmm.
And it's something as simple as, hey, remember when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago? This might be an example of where we need to improve our relationship with another player or with themselves or what have you.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the key here is getting the players involved. And so when we do create a session, we have an icebreaker. We always try to have some form of food, and it's after practice, and it's kind of fun. And we always put them in groups, so it's not
Okay.
just just one person wrestling with these questions.
Hmm.
And it's really coming up with questions for where you are and what you need to work on as a team. So I call it conceptual team building.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's fascinating. And we might come back to some of these things. I want to keep working through
Sure.
your kind of career timeline and you were after Iowa, you decided to move on to Brown, and sometimes, Paul, we have a lot of coaches who listen to this who wrestle with when should they make a move? Should they make a move? Should they stay in one place? And I'm sure if you'd stayed in Kenyon, you probably would have challenged the swimming coach for the number of national championships. But the obviously the personal component to it. Sometimes assistant coaches wrestle with, do I really want to be a head coach? Am I happy as an why do I need to feel the pressure to go be a head coach? But just trying to get into your mind as to how you wrestled with these decisions as to when to make the move and what was the right place for you and why. So you chose
Sure.
to leave Iowa. Tell us why.
Yeah, and I think, I left Kenyon to find more of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I left Iowa. I would say it's two things happened. One is my mom passed away in 2001. So, and I was 42. So there's kind of a midlife question. And the question is, and this is, to me, this is the best question that you can use with your players all the time. What do I want? What is it that I want? And you have these take stock moments in your life. And you have to step back and really look at things. And the answer to my question at that time, and it didn't happen right away, but it became on the radar, which was, I want to get back to small private. Um, that's more of who I am
Mm-hmm.
and more of what I'm excited about. I really, I'll finish the story. And so I was content. And we also had our two daughters. One was, or both were trending Ivy, NESCAC type students. So kind of hedging our bet, it's like, well, it would make sense to go east. And I would have been happy with a NESCAC job, Amherst, Williams, Bowdoin, Bates, Middlebury, Wesleyan, those schools, or an Ivy. So 2004, I interviewed at Princeton, I interviewed at Brown, I interviewed at Wesleyan, and ended up at Brown. So, so that's more of the rationale, and I think it was timing in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to, and also not rushing into it. I had the 2 years to kind of think about what it was I wanted to do, and I
Mm-hmm.
think my issue with Iowa, which was tricky, is it's just not my environment. I'm not a bells and whistles guy. And it's funny, I've interviewed, we'll keep this off the record, I'm teasing. When I was at Brown, I had a couple other opportunities to go back into the Power Fours.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd get there and it's just like, God, this does not feel right.
Yeah.
And I'd get all excited heading into it. And it's just like, no.
Yeah.
And there's something about the sense of community that you get at the smaller schools that it's just tougher. I always call Power Fours the GQ world, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a business, and everybody's got the suit on. And D3 is a little more casual, Ivy's a little more casual, Denver's super casual. I think I was the only guy on the campus wearing a suit when I interviewed. So,
Okay.
uh,
Okay. Well, yeah. So then you're at Brown and you decide to step away from college coaching completely, and you move into becoming the AD and director of tennis at a prep school in New Hampshire. And talk about that decision. Why was it? Why were you ready to step away from college coaching? And did you at that point ever think you'd come back to it?
um, I didn't think I'd ever get back to it.
Okay.
Uh, as you hit your 60s, it's kind of like, well, the clock is ticking, and my God, who's going to hire you anyway? So that's always the other question. But it was a weird one because it was the first job I ever chose because I bought a house. So we bought this an estate in New Hampshire, 2017, and then I worked at Brown the next year, sold our houses there, and stayed in an apartment, had the house up here in New Hampshire. And then the next year, this job opened up, which was 2.5 miles from the house.
Hmm.
So kind of a silly reason, but it's actually it actually worked out well because we still have the house and it's spectacular. I mean, we're on 270 acres,
Oh my
side of a
God.
mountain. Um, It's pretty ridiculous, and we'll retire here. And I had been
Yeah.
the head pro up in this area in 2004 to 2008, so had have a lot of friends here, and so it's our home.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, so I did the AD job at the Dublin School, which
Mm.
very close here, and I was the tennis coach. I taught philosophy classes, uh, did soccer, so was busy. It was a pretty crazy job.
And so what did you, I mean, having that time away from being a college tennis coach and having time to reflect and think about um, what you've done over several decades, and if you did go back to it, sometimes I find myself thinking about that,
Mhm.
and wow, I would be so different as a coach now. So when you came back to it at Denver, how had you reflected upon some of those things? Had your philosophy changed in any way? How are you maybe different as a coach, or what did you learn even just from your experiences as being an AD, soccer coach, philosophy
Mhm.
teacher again? Were there other things that came up in that lessons learned that you apply now to your time at Denver?
I think the one word that kind of jumps out is appreciation.
Hmm.
And all you college coaches out there that coach college tennis, don't quit your day job, because the prep school world, the high school world is on a different planet in terms of it's tough. I mean, I would get there at 7:45 in the morning, get home at 6:30 for dinner. I'd have a couple hours of class prep. Saturdays, I was there all day. Sunday, day off, but I was preparing for my classes and
Yeah.
taking care of business. You've got personnel issues. Um, so it's a full time. You're just grinding away, and I
Mm.
think one of the things that's cool about college athletics, being a head coach or being a coach for college tennis, you control your time, and you have a much better ebb and flow to the year and the seasons,
Mhm.
and it's a pretty amazing gig. But I think you have to get away to appreciate it
Yeah.
and to see what it's really like. And then in your question too, I think it did sharpen. I felt like I was rejuvenated coming back into it.
Mhm.
Again, incredibly appreciative. And I don't know. I, d- I think my time away allowed me to sharpen some of my thoughts, probably more related to Players Club and what we were about.
Mhm.
But no, I thought it was a good experience, but I call it my Ted Lasso moment. My wife and I were on a bike trip in Skyline Drive in Virginia, and I said I want to get back into coaching, and she's like, "All right, we're one night at the hotel, and she said, "All right, we're going to draw a 4 hour circle around New Hampshire,
Mhm.
and that's your radius to find a job." It's like okay, and you don't argue with the wife, but so I applied pretty much for every job that came open because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And Denver called and wanted to set up a Zoom, and I'm like, oh my God, now I got to tell my wife. So how do I explain this? Because it's a little bit outside the 4 hour drive, and I drew a big circle around it, and it's a 4 hour flight. So it was perfect. But you don't know if you can get back into it when you get out of it. So I
Yeah.
was very fortunate that Denver had an opening, and it was late in the process, and I think that made it a little easier for me to get back in.
Mm. Okay. And coming back then to Denver as well, I mean, I know a lot of older coaches have reported to me that they're having a harder time relating to kind of the next generation of players, or players that are just 18, 19 years old in general. And that gap between what they have in common has grown wider and wider. So how have you managed to stay connected with your players and continue to stay motivated to give them your best on a daily basis?
Mhm. No, that's a good question. I, I think there's a movie, No Country for Old Men,
Yeah.
and I mean you could retitle it No Country for Old Coaches, but there's a scene in there where Tommy Lee Jones talks to his uncle, and he's talking about, oh my God, the modern world and having to deal with, as a lawman, the issues that he has to deal with.
Hmm.
And his uncle says to him, and he tells another story, but his uncle says, it's always been coming. It's always coming. And basically what he's referring to is change is always coming.
Hmm.
There's always going to be change. And I
Yeah.
think part of the interesting part about our profession is we are going to have to adapt, and we're going to have to adopt new methodologies. The kids are going to change, and but I don't think they change as much as we think they do. I
Mm.
think the environment does, obviously, with social media and the phone, that's different. But what I like about, I mentioned those four statements: humans are
Yeah.
relational, storytellers, creators, meaning seekers. Those don't change. So those are pretty universal principles that make us human.
Hmm.
And what you have to focus on, and one of the reasons we focus on those things is they don't change. And when you focus on those, you can relate to anybody. You can relate to grandparents, you can relate to teenagers, because those are all the issues that we're all dealing with.
Mm.
And I think that's the trick, is that I've been able to frame my program around those concepts, which has allowed me, kids change, the environment changes, but same issues. We're all dealing with the same issues. And I think, to me, that's the continuity, that's the thread that runs through it.
Hmm.
Um, that, and it's what makes it interesting,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, what are we doing? Is it about the wins and losses? Probably not.
Mm.
It's about the people. And when you have a reunion, you don't talk about match point and matches. You talk about, hey, you see the kids, and you see players having their kids. And I'm of age now. I've got former players bringing their kids on Denver's campus to look
Yeah.
at it,
Yeah.
and it's just like, holy smokes. But we're not talking about the big match against Denison. We're
Yeah.
talking about their lives, who they are, what they're about. And so I think having that perspective is half the battle.
Mm.
And I'm realistic. I understand ADs want to win. A lot of ADs have not been coaches, so
Hmm.
there's a different perspective, different worldview. But that's part of the change too.
Hmm.
And what I learned at Kenyon is, uh, once we had a purposeful framework to our program, we won more,
Mm.
and that's the irony.
Yeah.
And because we were focusing on what was important, which is the people
Hmm.
that we're working with. So,
Yeah. And Paul, just I'd like to touch upon how you developed yourself as a coach. You referenced your assistant coach back at Kenyon, the swimming
mhm,
coach. I imagine there was other coaches within the department, but especially you had background more maybe in soccer. How did you go about educating yourself on how to become the best tennis coach you could be and add value to the players? We've talked about maybe the off court part of it, developing that culture, but on court, how did you make yourself the best coach you could be to help develop your players on the court, whether it was from a tactical or technical perspective?
mhm.
Tell us about that journey a little bit.
Yeah, I think I could probably break it down. My years at Kenyon, very busy, um, and I think the focus there was on tactics and team building. I
Hmm.
think if I look at what I did, I, I knew enough technique to be dangerous, and we would do technical work, but it wasn't as clear as it needed to be. And my time at Iowa, I had a few more resources. I only had the one team, so I could focus more on the technique. And I worked with a guy named Charlie Darley, who played at Cal Berkeley. He's a master coach, master mover, and also spent some time with Steve Stefanke. And that completely changed how I look at technique. And so I would look at Iowa as more of my continuing to build on what I was doing, but I added that technical layer
Hmm.
that really kind of unified what I was up to with the tennis. In D3, I used to have to do all the strength and conditioning. And now we had, at Iowa and Brown and at Denver, we've got coaches for that.
Hmm.
Um, but I think really the technical development has been a kind of a big plus recently.
Hmm.
And the thing that I learned, and I'm still shocked that I went to the NCAA tournament. I'm on the NCAA committee, and we went and watched the teams play last spring, and went with another committee member, and we went to practice. I'm not going to name the team; they were pretty good. Um, we wanted to see if we could pick their lineup,
Mm.
just watching them practice, and we used one criterion: posture balance.
Wow.
All right, got
Hmm.
one and two right.
Hmm.
They were a toss up. They're both going to be pros. They're pretty
Yeah.
damn good. But 3, 4, 5, and 6 out of balance on their backhands. And then it was a matter of kind of, and then we watched the volleys. Oh my God, they're all over the place. Um, and we did that. Then this fall, at the NCAA tournament, we had a player. She lost in the round of 16. So the round of 16 to the finals, I looked at the men and the women, and I only looked at posture balance. Best on the women's side, DJ Bennett,
Mm.
lost in the finals. Best on the men's side, Michael Zhang,
Mm.
not even close.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned from Stefanki
Mm.
is that we have gotten away from understanding what proper posture and balance looks like. And that's how you clean up the technical. And it's amazing. We'll spend probably half our technical time just trying to get these kids in balance
Mm.
and getting them back in balance. But you think about it, we're probably one of the only sports that doesn't focus on posture balance. So
Hmm.
imagine a gymnastics coach not thinking about posture balance,
Yeah.
a golf coach, a diver, a soccer player receiving a ball. If you're out
Hmm.
of balance, what's your first touch going to be like?
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it. And it's obvious when you look at it. That's the irony of the whole damn thing. But
Right.
and it's pretty cool because it fixes most of your players' issues.
Hmm.
Now we could spend an hour on the volley and posture balance, but um, that's
Yeah.
what I go more the McEnroe way. And I know so many of the college coaches, it's eyes to the ball, eyes to
Hmm.
the ball. So what am I doing right now? Just getting out of balance. But
Yep.
yeah. So that would be kind of my coaching arc with the with directionals at Kenyon, our practice system at Kenyon, our team building at Kenyon. Kenyon was really my lab. What
Mm.
I wasn't able to get out of Kenyon was the technical side. And that was a function of I've never had a good mentor as a coach.
Hmm.
Uh, just whatever my surroundings were, circumstances.
Yeah. And then Paul, I know we've touched upon the directional several times, but for coaches who may be unaware of the directional, especially new coaches coming into our profession, can you briefly explain what they are, and then how they became widely understood and adopted really across the world? I mean, not just
Mhm.
kind of within college coaching circles.
Yeah, directionals are interesting. It's so the question is, when do you change the direction of the ball?
Hmm.
And so I look at tactics in three different areas: what type of spin to put on the ball, where to play from, court position, and then the other question is when to change direction. And this came out of Chuck Creasy's book, Total Tennis Training. And Chuck had a comment which was, "Don't change the direction of the ball. Try to hold the angle of the ball, especially from the baseline." And so I went out and tried it, and it didn't make sense because there were balls that your body wanted to rotate on. And let's say if we're in a cross court deuce rally, you hit a ball through the middle to my backhand. We're both righties. My body wants to turn on that ball,
Mm.
and so that's the natural way to play. And so that's where the distinction between outside balls and inside balls was created. And You need to be clear on that. And once you are, then the question is, when do you change direction of the ball? So outside ball, high percentage is not to change direction. Inside ball, high percentage is to change direction. What if you want to go line? Um, just that expression, using the word line, that's our target.
Mm,
And if you go out on a tennis court, what do you see? You see lines. What do we aim at? We aim at what we see. So we aim at the lines. So how do we clean up the going line from a cross court ball? Uh, the easiest way is to go parallel to the sideline, but then I've used the word line again. So what we do is we go geometrically, we go perpendicular to the baseline. And the idea is you want to penetrate the baseline.
hmm.
So those are the three main guidelines. I did a talk last week at the Texas Tennis Coaches Association, and I listed there's five different levels to directionals, and kind of broke it down a little bit farther and a little bit more minute. We've added, Shaughnessy's way he breaks down the court with A, B, C, D. We've added that. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the reasons we did really well at Kenyon was I had the directionals and nobody else did.
Hmm.
And we were a nightmare to play. Our 93 team won a national title. We graduated 5 seniors that started. We had 5 freshmen the next year. They weren't allowed to go line. So we went outside ball, no change, inside ball change, and that was it.
Yeah.
And we ended up being 8th in the country that year.
Yeah.
And a nightmare to play because we never made any mistakes. You had to beat us. And then the next year we opened it up a little bit, brought in a good number one player, let him go 90, won a national championship. So a lot of it was just having that discipline, and nobody knew what we were doing.
Right.
I'd shared
And
it with one coach, Chuck Creasy, and that was it. Uh,
yeah. Yeah. And then Chuck popularized it. Is that kind of
he
how it
did.
came
Well,
just through the
Chuck,
book? Yeah.
yeah, Chuck told me not to tell anybody because it was going to be our secret. And then we put the chapter in the book, and that was part of it too. Is that he loved it. He was having success at Clemson with it,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of like it would be fun to try like at an Iowa or a Kansas to see how it worked.
Yeah. And just in terms of getting the players to buy into that, did you face a lot of resistance from that group at Kenyon? Like they're like, this is just too hard. It's requiring too much discipline. I mean, how did you get them to buy in to just stick with the game plan?
Well, and it gets back to having this kind of an ideal or a defining commitment to what we're about. And we
Hmm.
did this through Players Club. And we had a definition, which was um, our goal is to have a team of players. A player is someone who's willing to suffer. Now, that's an uplifting statement right there. You can rally the troops with come to practice today, we're going to suffer. It doesn't get any better than that. But the etymology of suffer is to be put under. And so the idea is how do we respond when we're put under? That's
Hmm.
the essence of sports. So, we hear the word suffer, and it's one of these SU words, submit, surrender, suffer, where you are put under. And our culture, it's not what our culture strives for.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
want to be in control. We don't want to be under. We don't want to necessarily have to. And the under here is being part of a team.
Hmm.
And the under here is also how do you play good tennis? So having that discipline, having that structure is just another a form of being put under.
Hmm.
And our practices were really structured and purposeful, and the kids saw the benefit. And we got really good at doing a few things well. We got really
Hmm.
good on the cross. We got really good on the inside ball. Uh,
Hmm.
so, I think where players struggle more, and I've had some coaches tell me this, is when you chart practices and keep score and record it,
Hmm.
that's where I know some programs have had some issues where the players have kind of pushed back. I think
Hmm.
directionals, um, a little less so, and it gives you a common vocabulary, and I think that's essential.
Yeah.
So, and the players are now aware of, one, did they miss it for a tactical reason or did they miss it for a technical reason?
Hmm.
And if it's a technical reason, that's okay. If the tactics were fine,
Hmm.
we're gonna miss balls. But
Yeah.
it's getting them to be clear on what type of error they're making. Um,
Um, yeah. And I guess, Paul, from then when you're evaluating talent recruiting, your, let's say, Winter Nationals is coming up, you're out there. Are those some of the things that you're looking at, or what are you looking at to identify the best fit for your program, coaching style, coaching philosophy? Is it balance and tactical awareness, or you feel like, well, you will build those things in once they come under your tutelage? So yeah, talk about your talent ID process.
I think it involves a lot of prayer. So uh, you don't know. You don't
No.
know. Uh, some of the best one of the best players I had at Iowa, Hillary Mintz, she wanted to go to Penn State. They said no. Wanted to go to Ohio State. They said no. Wanted to go to Minnesota. They said no. I got her to walk on for a year.
Hmm.
And as a freshman, she's first team all Big Ten singles and doubles.
Yeah.
And we had two. Megan Reset was the other one. We had two freshmen, first team all Big Ten. And you don't know. You don't know. But what I look for is, are they athletic? Uh, can they move? And Hillary, that was the thing that coaches were concerned. How can she move to the corner? Well, all we did was move her a pace back, and now she
Hmm.
can cover the corner. So, simple adjustments like that. But no, I think the talent ID, it's easy to spot the good ones. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll try to get off my high horse, but most of them are out of balance. Most of them don't move well. And I don't say they don't move well athletically, they don't move well technically. And
Hmm.
even the first move. And I like a distinction that Stefanski makes is players either play ahead of the beat, on the beat, or behind the beat.
Hmm.
And college players, junior players, we play ahead of the beat because we're anxious. Um,
Mm.
college players, good ones, pro players, they play probably on the beat or closer to on the beat. Uh, the best in the world in all sports play behind the beat.
Mm.
And you think about it,
Yeah.
they don't anticipate. They wait. They have a total different sense of time.
Mm.
And so, for instance, you know the difference between the split step and the float step.
Hmm.
So the float step is where you go up and you land on one foot and push. The split step is when you land on both feet.
Hmm.
Why do players split versus float? And I'd say probably 95% of tennis players split, and they're
Mm.
taught to split.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what are you teaching them? You're teaching them to be ahead of the beat.
Hmm.
And ideally, what you would teach is to unweight a little bit later, read where the ball's going, and then land and go and push with that outside foot.
Right.
Um, but that takes you have to learn how to read that, but you also have to slow down.
Mm.
And that's a part of the balanced posture because John Wooden, uh, be quick but don't hurry.
Mm.
So what does that mean? It means move as fast as you can on balance.
Right.
And what happens is when you get a player to do that, and I worked with a player last week. She was a little bit in a hurry. She was leaning on balls, trying to create more pace. And I just said, Lou, get back, feel your center. Let's get back, be on balance. And we did the drill again. And she goes, I have so much more time. I'm so much more relaxed. And the ball is actually being hit cleaner and faster.
Hmm.
And there really wasn't much of a change other than slowing down. And we're in some ways what we're having to do is get the player to fight their nature. And how do we coach them? We coach them to be fast feet. Do this, do this. If you watch the best movers, it's not fast feet.
Yeah.
It's relaxed. It's a little bit less tension. And you think of martial arts, they're moving from the core. They're balanced. It looks effortless. That's why we like watching Federer. That's why we like to watch Hingis or when Barty was playing.
Hmm.
But so often, and I can give you another picture just to help with this. It's the difference between a dog and a cat. If a dog sees a mouse, it will just go as
Mm.
fast as it can. What does the mouse do? It moves out of the way, and the dog slides into the wall. And here's the cat. Cat comes up and it goes, pop, pop. It waits for the mouse to move.
Mm.
And that's, I think, unfortunately, I feel like the way tennis is being taught, we're teaching our players to be really good dogs, but we've lost the cat aspect because
Mm.
if anything, it's about not anticipating. It's about slowing down. It's
Hmm.
about actually watching the ball.
Mm.
And then you move. And the truth of the matter is you always have time.
Yeah.
And we think we don't. We always think it's a, what are most errors on the volley made? Early errors. They're not late errors. They're early errors. So here now we've taken away time. We've pushed you closer to the net.
Hmm.
You should have less time. You're
Right.
still making early errors.
Mm.
Why is that? Well, that's how we're wired.
Hmm.
That's how we perceive things. So Stefanke had a great drill where you would feed volleys to a player, but they couldn't move until the ball crossed the net.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you hit your best volleys
Hmm.
because now all of a sudden you're back in here. Can't
Hmm.
see me, but you're back in here rather than out here.
Right.
And
Which,
again, it's we're teaching the players to be ahead of
mm,
the beat.
yeah. And so, Paul, how do you help? I mean, so my son's a soccer player, and he's always, every time he goes, watches himself back. He's like, God, I had so much time in that position. He thought he was being hurried. He thought he's been
Mhm.
rushed. And probably the same with tennis. It's like, wow, it's a little slower than I thought. When I was out there playing, I felt hurried, I felt rushed. But look at all this time I actually had on these balls to maybe move up to it and be
Mhm.
a little bit more aggressive. So do you do that video work with players, or is it a combination of things? I mean, how do you help them slow down? Can you give a couple more examples, maybe?
Uh, I think awareness drills, inner game of tennis. The whole idea there is getting the player to be aware
Hmm.
and getting your body to do what it's capable of doing. So, so I mean, the key there is uh, you don't have to do a lot of video work. What you can do is get the player to be aware of what they're doing. So here's an example. Here's a drill for your situation. Up, back, and stay. So I'm at the baseline. Every ball I hit, I'm either going to say up, back, or stay.
Hmm.
And it starts to get you to read the balls you should go up to. So you go up if it's a little bit shorter. And you say stay if it's a ball that's you're going to stay comfortably with. And then there may be a deep ball to the baseline. Now I've got to move back.
Hmm.
Um, but it starts with them being aware of what is possible. And when you do that, and we'll have players do this in a match
Hmm.
because they're not being aggressive enough, but now all of a sudden they're rhythming up to the ball. And again, they're rhythming up to the ball with a little bit of a gallop step, but with perfect posture and balance.
Mm.
And it's learning how to move on the tennis court like that. And
Yeah.
things slow down. Um, it's it is amazing. But I think the other thing is like this conversation we're having, most people aren't aware of that distinction with the ahead of the beat, on the beat, behind the beat.
Mm.
And this was in an article 2001 from Tennis Week. And I read that, and he gave examples of Muhammad Ali, Joe Montana, Wayne Gretzky, Bill Russell blocking shots. Russell never left his feet until the ball was released.
Mm.
Go watch a basketball game.
Yeah.
Everybody's anticipating
Hmm.
and learning how to move on balance with perfect posture. Joe Montana rode quarter horses. So a quarter horse is a sheepdog, basically.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're riding the horse, you don't know where it's going to go. If you anticipate, you fall off.
Mm.
So you have to go and you learn to go with the flow. You think of the catch with Joe Montana against the Cowboys, that one highlight. He released the ball at the very last second,
Mm.
and Dwight Clark caught it, and they scored a touchdown, went to the Super Bowl.
Mm.
But you think of John McEnroe, let cords. He never was fooled by a let cord. Now think about the rest of us, how we go to a let cord.
Yeah.
We're diving all in, man. My head's down to the ball, and the ball's
Right.
going over, and it's just like you've anticipated what's going to happen.
Mm.
McEnroe always had. And I tell you, go on the Instagram. I'm not an Instagram guy, but if you want to watch McEnroe, go to these Instagram clips, and what you'll see is that his footwork is phenomenal. Everybody always said McEnroe had great hands,
Mm-hmm.
good hands, but every volley he hit, he had perfect balance and posture.
Yeah.
And that is the purpose of footwork. The whole purpose of footwork is to get you to the ball with balance and posture.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just to get you to the ball. There's a lot of ways to get to the ball, but it's to have that perfect balance and posture. And you go watch McEnroe on his volleys, he looks like a stick, his upper body.
Mm-hmm.
And this is him moving around the court volleying. And it's absurd, but I don't know who taught him that or how he learned to do that. But that's why his volleys are pretty amazing.
Mm.
Uh, and you can see what he's doing. Low
Yeah.
volley, still a stick.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. Well, Paul, I mean, that kind of leads me to my next question, and maybe it's just the time, society in general. But you've also obviously spent a lot of time thinking deeply about these matters, wrestling with them, having conversations about that, and kind of again, not being hurried or maybe working at your own pace. And I feel like a lot of our coaches, they are being hurried. They are reacting to situations, over anticipating, shall we say. How might you encourage the next generation of coaches to slow down a bit, think more deeply about these matters, whether it's on the court, off the court, what they want to build, their vision for their program, how they want to interact with their players, with staff, within their athletic department, whatever it is, but also developing those creative juices, so they've learned a lot from listening to this conversation with you, from you, but how do they take some of those concepts and make them their own maybe, or yeah, I guess my question is, how do you get them to slow down and think more deeply about what they're trying to accomplish here as a college
Mm.
tennis coach?
Yeah, and I mean, why do we change? Usually something has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So why did I change? It was my reaction to just how empty it was to win a national title in '93.
Mm.
So that was a take stock moment for me. So we have these moments, and I think the trick is, can we cut them off at the pass, or do we have to sit around and wait for something bad to happen? Do we have to wait for to be fired, or or something happens with your team, or X, Y, and Z? And I think two things: be curious, be looking, uh, and I like this expression. So look for things. Be willing to use your imagination too. And imagination is about what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So what is possible at where you are? So you've got to balance the way things are and the way things can be, but use the imagination. I think too often, to your point, Dave, we get so busy.
Mm.
Um, but to me, that's the fun part, is creating and thinking about what's possible, and taking ideas. I mean, I read that Stefanke article. It changed how I looked at athletics.
Mm.
So I can no longer look at athletics the same way. And that's a paradigm shift. I think directionals is a paradigm shift, because once you see it,
Mm-hmm.
you can't go back. In some ways, you're corrupted. So And it is that way with the balanced posture. You know, I think I'll probably get kicked off the NCAA committee because they'll think I'm just, that's all I can see the world as is balance and posture. But no, I think you got to be curious, and you got to be creative and use the imagination, but tap into your resources. Most of my ideas didn't come from tennis.
Hmm.
They come from other avenues, whether it's a business book or a sport bio or a soccer book. Everything I learned about coaching initially came out of soccer
Mm.
because I did all the soccer certifications when I started out. There
Yep.
really weren't any in tennis, um, not at the level that soccer does. And
Mhm.
so I learned when you plan a practice, you can do one or two concepts. That's it. That's all you focus on. There's a progression that you build through, and you end with play that relates to those concepts. So
Mm.
purposeful, focused, productive, and but I learned that through soccer.
Yeah.
So, and I do think the USTA high performance, I did that a long time ago. I assume
Yep.
Paul Lubbers has still got that rocking and rolling.
It's
Um,
not no. Paul is no longer doing it, unfortunately. I know the USDA are trying to reimagine what that looks like going forward, but I think I might have been one of the last people to do it about 5 years ago.
okay. I
Yeah.
thought that was a great program,
Yeah.
and an answer to some of the other federations and other sports.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely worth bringing back.
Yeah. I know the.
I, I think the other thing, David, is why Chuck Creasy. I read his book. I got his book at the Princeton Library in 1989. We were at Nationals. I go back to the hotel. It's 9 p.m. I stay up till 2 in the morning reading that book. And I'm a coach. I've got a team at Nationals. And here's my takeaway from that book. I know nothing about tennis because the depth that Creasy had thought about tennis
Yeah.
was just on a different plane. And two things happened. One, uh, I borrowed some of his ideas, but two, I learned that I have to think differently, that there is another layer and level of how to think about tennis.
Hmm.
And so that kind of spurred me to be a better thinker. And you never know what ideas are going to pop out. Um, but I called Creasy once, and it was like I was calling the president of the United States. I was so nervous. And I sent him directionals. Directionals sat on his desk for 6 months. And I get a call from Chuck, and I'm like, it's Chuck Creasy. I'm telling my assistant, it's like, God, I'm on the phone with God. And so we talk, and you find out he loves to talk about tennis.
Hmm.
Stefanke, I call him up, say, hey, it was David Thornton, who was at Vandy,
Yeah.
and he's down in Knoxville now. His daughter Maeve plays for the Volunteers, and Joey Scrivano, who's at Baylor. The three of us go up to Stefanke's ranch in Napa Valley. We're there 7 hours. He talks for 6.5 hours. His wife, he sends his wife, go get these guys some sandwiches. And I
Yeah.
come home, I order $180 worth of books off of Amazon. And but here's my whole point in this. Ask. Coaches love to spill the cookies. They
Hmm.
love to talk about it, and people don't ask them.
Yeah.
So from a mentoring standpoint, if you feel somebody is doing something interesting and you're interested in it, call them up, shoot them an email.
Hmm.
Probably going to get a response.
Yeah.
And the times I've done it, I've gotten responses, and in some ways, it's changed my coaching life.
Yeah.
So don't, yeah. And what's the worst thing that happens? Nothing. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody will move on.
yeah.
Well, Paul, we're going to move into some rapid fire questions. I'll ask them quickly. You don't have to answer them quickly, but what is the best piece of advice you have received as it relates to your college coaching career?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I think tennis is suffering,
Hmm.
because that gave me a point of reference to build the program around.
Mm.
And there's a book I would recommend, and I do recommend this to all young coaches that I talk to. I always tell them, get the road less traveled.
Mm.
And the first sentence of that book is life is difficult.
Hmm.
The second sentence is, as the Buddhists say, life is suffering. Okay. And one of our players clubs, one of the things we do is we read usually at some point in every 4 years, we'll read the first 88 pages of that book. And
Yeah.
it's about discipline. There's 4 different areas. And but you can take that book and you can take almost any sport book. So life is difficult, life is suffering. Scratch out the word life, put in the word tennis.
Mm.
And it really describes what we're about. Tennis is difficult. Tennis is suffering. All right. We're coaches. Scratch out the word tennis. Let's put in the word coach.
Hmm.
Coaching is difficult. Coaching is suffering. And here's the thing. I've had rough spots, patches with teams. It has not always been a gravy train. That is what's gotten me through. Because when I'm dealing with something really difficult, saying that coaching is difficult, coaching is suffering, once I accept that, then what I'm dealing with is normal. It's the
Mm.
way things are because it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
If we push, if we challenge kids, we're gonna have speed bumps along the way. And we're human. We're gonna either do something stupid or say something or whatever,
Hmm.
but coaching is difficult. Coaching is suffering. When you coach, you are put under. That is the essence of it. But
Hmm.
why do we don't want it to be that way? We fight it when it happens. But I think to me, knowing that and having that framework, it allows me to get through the difficult spots.
Hmm.
And it gives me a framework for our team.
Yeah. Paul, the next question is there, and you've given a lot of advice here, but is there one piece of advice you relay most consistently when a younger coach or any coach in general ask you for advice? Is there one thing that you constantly provide that maybe you haven't shared so far?
Oh, no, I think striking a balance. You can go down the rabbit hole in this profession and just be all in.
Hmm.
And I like balance. I mean, I like the word balance. You think about you've got self and team. That's what we're dealing with. How do you strike a balance with your players between self and team? How do you strike a balance between yourself and your team? It can't always be about the team. And I think that relates to everything. I like polarities. I like opposites um, and trying to strike a balance.
Hmm.
And you think of all those relationships that I mentioned earlier, it's striking a balance. There are
Hmm.
times to be team centered and there are times to be selfish for a player. And some kids, we know a lot of kids that are selfish, but there are some kids that hide in the team so they don't have to deal with themselves.
Hmm.
So again, it's getting them back to center to be balanced.
Hmm.
But I like that. I mean, I think it's kind of a little bit of an Eastern motif, and but I do think it is about striking a balance in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah. And then Paul, is there a favorite drill you like to do with your team, or maybe your team has a favorite drill that they like to do, or
Um, I think I mean, maybe we're a little simpatico here. I think the team likes it too. I call it footwork flow, and it's kind of a cool drill because there's so many layers and variations. You put a player in the deuce court. You put 2 players back at the other side, but it's 1v1. There's only one up at a time. They're going to alternate.
Mhm.
And the one player in the deuce court moves the one player around. And that's the footwork flow part. So they're working on posture balance. They're working on weighting with flow rather than with split steps. And you'll do that for 45 seconds. The next player comes up for 45 seconds. And you do 2 rotations. And then we switch. One player then comes over, the other player goes back over. But what I like about that drill is you can do a lot of different variations. So here's an example. Um, if the one player in the deuce shows slice, the player at the baseline has to come forward. All right. And they'll come in, they'll volley back to where it came from, and then they can volley to the open court. The next person feeds, and that's how our rotation goes.
Mhm.
Or if you want to work on defense, you can do the first. 15, 20 seconds where that player is being moved around the court. And then the one player in the deuce court can now go on offense and make that one player on the baseline play defense. So now
Hmm.
you've got half of its flow, and then now all of a sudden you're on defense. So
Okay.
you can add a lot of different layers to it, and then you can do it out of the deuce corner, out of the middle, and out of the ad court. So
Okay.
lots of different variation.
And you've referenced a few books already, but is there another book that's had a huge impact on you as a coach?
Um, oh, I'm always reading. I probably read too many books. I think Road Less Traveled would be a definite one, and I'll add one little thing to the Road Less Traveled. The first 88 pages are about discipline. The next third of the book is about love, and I think there's a great quote in there. His definition of love, I think, is perfect for coaches, and and it comes from St. Thomas Aquinas back in the 1400s. It's to uplift one's own or another's spirit. And you think about us as a profession, uh, what a great concept for us to practice.
Mm.
So when I go to practice, it's to uplift another's spirit. And you can do that. Doesn't mean you can't be honest. Doesn't mean you can't challenge or push. But ultimately, the goal is to uplift. And I think that's such a great definition and such a great definition of coaching.
Mm.
And it's really, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get our players to be the author of their own lives, to take responsibility. But at the same time, we're teaching them to be part of a community and
Hmm.
how to not only uplift themselves, but to uplift others. And at the end of the day, that's the takeaway if we've been successful. Uh,
Hmm.
so I think that's the other part of the road less traveled, where it gets into the whole concept of love. And
Hmm.
then the third section is the concept of grace. And grace is a slippery one because we always think of grace in relationship to religion, but grace is really it's giving or receiving more than you deserve. And you think about that. What would it be like to give a teammate more than they deserve?
Hmm.
What would it be like to receive more than you deserve?
Yeah.
It would be a totally different environment. The gymnastics coach at Iowa, when I was there, this is kind of funny. I based my program on suffering. He based his on grace.
Hmm.
But we were doing this. It got at the same things,
Yeah.
but to have that kind of northern light, that guidepost, really gives you clarity in what you're doing and what you're
Hmm.
about and what your purpose is. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I guess switching gears here a lot. What is one rule change that you believe could help college tennis be more appealing to a wider audience? Is there one rule change?
I would say I would go with no third sets in singles.
Hmm.
And we did that. We tried it. We did the test up through, I don't know, national indoors. And we played Cornell in a match. And this was at ECAC's tournament. We had four third set breakers all going on at the same time.
Hmm.
We won the doubles point. I think we were up 2-1. And it was unbelievable. And they all finished in 10 to 15 minutes.
Mm.
And it didn't come down to the last one. And I remember somebody else on the committee we were talking about at the NCAA meeting. Somebody else had one where it was like four, and it did come down to the last one, and it all took place in 15 minutes. And the argument against that is always, but then it becomes less of a game of conditioning because you're
Hmm.
not playing a full third. And I think the counter to that is you've created a 2 hour window, which is going to be fan friendly. You've created drama because a lot of these matches are going to come down to two or
Yeah.
three of these breakers all at the same time. And fans are going to be going, all 50 of them are going to go from one court to the next and come back. And then the way around the fitness side is now it allows you to play double headers.
Mm.
You can play triple headers. So if a coach wants more, and here's what it also adds, it's hard for a mid major to schedule in the SEC because they've got so many matches.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've freed up every match they have against an SEC, they can do a doubleheader.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're getting more fitness because you're playing 4 sets of singles.
Yeah.
You're getting ready for some grand slams now.
Yeah.
So I think we need to get back to something like that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was a guy that didn't want to go get rid of the 2 out of 3 sets for doubles,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that format is incredibly exciting,
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably going to be our future if we're smart, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because we need to be relevant. We need to be community and fan friendly.
For sure. Okay. Good one. Well, kind of expanding upon that, given everything that's going on with the NCAA, lawsuits, NIL, conference realignment, how do you believe Division One college tennis might look differently 5 years from now? Is there any predictions or anything maybe ADs, associate ADs, anybody else within the industry is sharing with you that 5 years from now, college tennis is going to look like X or Y?
That's a tough one. That's one of those no country for old coaches. Thank God I'm old. I don't know. You know, it's like I think we got to fix the format. We've got to make ourselves video friendly, and that could be streaming with. You can still have streaming on 6 courts, but the time, I think the time, and then we've got to be cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
So fundraising is going to be huge, but I think a lot of that starts with community engagement, community involvement. Um, but I would go back to the format.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play a lot of double headers. You know, let's bring them in, and it needs to be more cost effective. But I think it's a slippery slope. I think we're not a revenue sport,
Mm-hmm.
so I would almost be a little more pessimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I think D3 is going to hold tight.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe some of the power conferences, but
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on for sure.
Mhm.
Well, on a brighter note, then let's finish with what is one thing you hope your players have learned from you by the time they graduate?
Oh, I think I said it earlier, which is, you know, be the author of your own life. Know that going in. And that's your academic life, your tennis life, your personal life. You're responsible, you have control.
Mm-hmm.
You can make these things happen. And know that you need others. And that's the team aspect, that's the community aspect, that's the love aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just about uplifting yourself, it's about uplifting others. And the value of college tennis is we've put you in a place, we've put you in circumstances that allow you to do that and to practice doing that
Mm-hmm.
and appreciate it because it's such a rare opportunity before you head out into the real world.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that's a nice place to leave it, Paul. I believe this is maybe the longest podcast I've ever done, and I could go another 2 hours. So thank
yeah.
you. We might need to do a part two at some point, but I know our coaches are going to really enjoy this. So appreciate you spending some time with me this morning.
Well, thank you, Dave, for the opportunity, and as I said earlier, always happy to talk tennis. So
Right.
I should be careful what I wish for. But
We'll be
well,
talking more for sure. Thank you, Paul.
thanks.